bailar, que la fiesta ya empezó. Con este ritmo caliente se los deja.
Our presenter, Mr. Dipak Majumdar, he presented Sri Lanka with me last meeting. So this meeting I called him back to talk about Cuba. He went there as part of a Globus tour, and he'll tell you the details of that tour. You probably know his background. He's an engineer, and he worked for Bechtel Corporation for about 43 years. And since 2014, he retired. He has his master's from Berkeley and an MBA also. And what else? We'll let him tell you everything else. He and I go back from our days in Sri Lanka. We were kids. I met him before I was 4 years old. And we somehow managed to get linked back together through my daughter's dance performances when his wife called. So anyway, let him take over. I'm going to be the computer person.
Thank you, Srila. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll let Srila do the presentation here. Hope I didn't disconnect anything. Okay. So basically, I went to Cuba in 2023 March. It's been 2 years. And the title is somewhat enigmatic, Entrepreneurial Spirit of Cuba. This is a travel group. So Srila was saying, does this fit? So the next slide tells you a little bit as to why I chose this title. Basically, these days, because of travel restrictions, you can only go there on a family visit, official business, as a journalist, for some professional research. Educational, religious, or to attend some public performance, athletics, etc. And I went with this Globus group for support for the Cuban people. So these are activities to strengthen the Cuban society, help their entrepreneurs. The government has been relaxing some of their tight rules. It's, as you know, that it's the only communist government in the Western Hemisphere. I guess Venezuela is somewhat socialist, but anyway, Cuban is wholly communist, central run economy. Let's go to the next one. So this tour was, I'll briefly cover some of the tourist sites here in Cuba. Up north, we started in Havana, and then we went down to Trinidad at the other end, and back up to Cienfuegos and back to Havana. So we covered only a section of Cuba. So the western part of Cuba was developed by the Spanish people, primarily in the beginning, with sugarcane plantations. The east side was developed a little later, except the second most important town in Cuba, down to the south, called Santiago de Cuba. And this turned out to be a big pirates hangout and a beautiful fortress there. It's also the heritage site, a World Heritage Site. And the famous Guantanamo prison is out here. One of the 7 sites that there are about 3 of them, 7 World Heritage Sites. 3 of them are natural. One is the Humboldt National Park, which is in this area, named after the great German explorer Humboldt. The other one is near Havana. It's a valley with karst hills and mountains. It's a pretty valley. And the other one is out here. It's called the Grandma, embarkation of the Grandma. I'll talk a little bit about Grandma a little bit. Well, other than that, it's all mostly the heritage sites are the Spanish heritage cities. Trinidad, back again, okay. Cienfuegos and Old Havana. Okay, so yes, as like in all other Caribbean islands, you have great white sandy beaches, palm fringe beaches, coral reefs, good scuba and snorkeling. Um, there's some hiking in the high mountains to go up to about 6,600 feet up here in this area. And this is where, when Fidel Castro landed with his group of people, they hid here, and it was hard to find them in that mountain area. So basically, this is the geography and the little coverage of the tourist spots in Cuba, and I'll take you through some of the Spanish heritage cities. It's about 800 miles long. It's the largest island in the Caribbean, and the narrowest point's about 20 miles wide. It goes up to about 100 miles wide at the other end. So these are some of the dry season is from November to March, but it rains off and on most of the time. Tropical weather. So it's the biggest island in the Caribbean. It's about a population of 11 million. Havana is the largest city, about 2 million people there. Incidentally, Havana is about the fourth largest city in the Caribbean. Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, and there's one other that's, I think, Dominican Republic. Let's see, there's a fourth one. Anyway, it's the fourth largest, but the populations of like Haiti is also 11 million, Dominican Republic is also 11 million. So this population is 11 million, but it covers the whole island. The ethnicity is mainly white, 64%, but it's a significant Afro-Cuban cultural presence in Cuba. The religion is mainly Catholic, but I came across this Santeria religion that I had heard of before, and I'll talk to you about it a little later. The exports are sugar, nickel, tobacco, fish. At one time, in fact, Cuba in the 1850s was the largest producer of sugar. But nowadays, the sugar industry has fallen off, and they're actually having to import sugar. And they have to import 70% of the food and fuel. So there's a lot of shortage of, like if the tourists bring in toothpaste, toothbrush, cosmetic, they're highly valued. And for the school children, crayons, erasers, they love it if the tourists can bring them some of these things, because things we take for granted, they rarely see them. So a little bit of history. There's evidence that indigenous people from South America came there as from over 2000 BC onwards. The Taino people came in about 180 to 500, 680. These are the indigenous people. When the Spanish, Christopher Columbus discovered Cuba in 1492, and then the Spanish presence started, and they used the indigenous people as slaves, and pretty soon, in about 50 years, 60 years, they were all wiped out because of chicken pox, smallpox, and other diseases that they hadn't known about before. So then they started importing slaves from Africa, and about 1 million slaves. In fact, the European countries banned slavery in 1816. But slavery continued till about 1860. Slaves were still being brought into Cuba. They were mainly from the west coast of Africa. So the first war of independence, when the Cubans rose against the Spanish, was in 1868, or the 10-year war. Carlos Cespedes is considered the father of Cuba. He was the leader of that. And then 1895, under Jose Marti, the second war of independence. And Jose Marti is a very famous figure in Latin America. He's a poet, novelist, very culturally gifted person and highly respected, and he joined the third Spanish War. And then the war continued until you heard of the explosion, the main, which 266 U.S. Seamen were killed out of about 340 people on the Bay of Havana. So with the sinking of the Maine was a big. That was the spark that started off the Spanish U.S. involvement in Spain, and then U.S. defeated Spain. And but okay, back in December, Spain, U.S. beat Spain. The war was mainly for Cuba and the Philippines, and that's good. So after that, the U.S. kept Cuba under their control. Let's say until 1902, when they finally given independence. Though they did sign a perpetual lease on Guantanamo Bay. Then, of course, 1956 was this revolution under Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro and a group of about 84 people landed by a small motorboat yacht from Mexico, landed in that area. I was saying the boat was called the Grandma, and the landing of the Grandma is a World Heritage Site. Out of the 84 people, only about 20 people survived. Rest of them were caught, killed, executed, whatever. And with those 20 people, the Cuban Revolution started, which is amazing. And then at the end of 58, finally, Havana fell. Havana fell to Castro's. And before that, between 1902 and 58, there were a series of dictatorial regimes, the most famous being... okay, back again. Let me look at a couple of notes. The most famous... Why did I forget that right now? Let's see. Anyone remember who was the dictator? Batista, right? Batista. Thank you. So, Batista, from the 1930s, he basically controlled, and that's when the mafia got into Cuba, gambling, prostitution, and the U.S. companies owned almost all the utilities, telephone, power, the sugarcane industry was all under U.S. companies. And this carried on there because of all the corruption, health, education all suffered. So when finally Batista was ousted in 1958, and then Castro came over, took over, and then by 1960, Castro declared communism to be the policy. They sided with the Russians, with Russia, at the height of the Cold War. I don't. Let's see. This is doing the same thing. So. One brings get the other one. Okay. Anyway, so this is working now. Okay. So that the mafia period during Prohibition days, gambling and all these things, prostitution, etc., flourished in Cuba. And then after that came Castro's with his communist regime. Next. Then there was the Bay of Pigs invasion, where about 1,500 Cuban immigrants from Florida were trained by the CIA and the covert support by the US, and they landed in the Bay of Pigs, but were quickly rounded up and defeated. And since that time, the relationship between Cuba and the US has been such that the U.S. has an embargo as okay, has an embargo on Cuba, and so as a result, there's very little business trading goods between USA and Cuba, and USA also discourages other countries from trading with Cuba. So this embargo has had a tremendous impact on the Cuban people. Russia stepped in, and they were buying sugar at about 5 times the world market price. They were subsidizing fuel for the Cubans until, of course, the 1990, when the Russian economy and the country Russia collapsed, or the USSR collapsed rather. And then that was called the special period, a day of great starvation, dire economic states for the Cuban people. That's when the government started slowly releasing or changing their communist strictures on private enterprise, and slowly the Cubans were given room to have their small businesses. And then during Obama's period, there was more relaxation, but then when Trump came on, everything went back. It tightened back again. So that's what I talked about the impact on Cuba as the Soviet Union collapsed. Until 1998, the communists don't like, they discouraged religion and religious, all the churches were shut down. But during the special period, again, a lot of relaxation. So John Paul actually was the first pope to visit Cuba in 1998. Then after, in 2008, Fidel retired, his brother Raul took over, and since then they've been slowly passing economic reforms. And finally Raul Castro, Fidel's brother, stepped down as Communist Party leader. And they still have very strict control. It's a highly structured, controlled society, but there are signs that things are beginning to relax. Small entrepreneurs are being allowed. For example, there were the hotels in Cuba, you could run them as local paladares, I think they were called, and you could only have 10 employees, and they had to be your relatives. So there were restrictions like this that prevented small businesses from developing. So now let's go into the slides themselves. Okay, the economy-wise, there's education, health, food, subsidized. The life expectancy, because of health, good health coverage, it's actually more than the US, 72.5. Very little malnutrition, but things are hard to get. Gas, medicines, electronics, clothing, baby food, toiletries. There are queues everywhere, lining up at the ration shops. And forget. So since they recognize that the Soviet-style planning was not sustainable, the government is allowing worker-owned cooperatives, self-employed enterprises. And that's what we were out there to see and to encourage. Next. Medical in Cuba, this is another interesting one. They have sort of internationalized the business of Cuba, and health is a big revenue source for the Cuban government. The doctors get only about $70 a month, and it is customary for patients to bring gifts, vegetable, fruits, when they see their doctors. In other occupations, the average salaries are $20 to $30 a month. And you can see that the hotel industry, where a maid can get tips, maybe $10 or even $20 a day, how valued those are. So you have doctors, scientists working in these hotels.
Is this the theater?
As
I don't
whatever.
know.
There's maybe even as
Okay.
janitorial.
I thought it was yours. I can go in.
Quite tragic.
Maybe I made a mistake.
However, the Cuban government does send out export their health services So if you go overseas, the Cubans charge about $8,000.
Is this the theater?
Doctors themselves get only about $1,800 a month. A lot of the money is
Yes, Stanley.
kept back to make sure that the doctors return back to Cuba.
Just leave the car.
So next slide.
Okay.
So here we are, we entered the Havana airport. It looks like any other small town US airport. It's sort of a little rundown. The hotels are all owned by the government, and there are now little better hotels to encourage tourism. This is the hotel we stayed in Japan as well. If you look at downtown Havana, there are a few buildings, not too tall, 20 floors. So nothing like major downtowns in the other capital cities. Next. So here the first project or entrepreneur we went to see was this community art project, which had converted the fishing town of Manitas right outside Havana under this Jose Fuster. And it's like the Gaudi in Barcelona and Picasso. His paintings. Okay. It's, okay. Come back. So anyway, so this was the first project that we. So some of his pictures, that's me and a friend of mine with the group. And these are some of his paintings. You can see it's the Picasso style. And also Gaudi's style of architecture and paintings. Okay, next. Then we went to this car repair shop, and this is amazing. These cars date back to the 50s. The Ford Fairlanes, the huge cars that Americans used to drive, Studebakers and Dodge, Chevrolets. But after '59, after the embargo, no spare parts. The American cars, were no longer sold. The cars you see are Chinese, the Lada from Russia, some of the European Citroens, Peugeots. But these cars are now family heirlooms, and to keep them going, the Cuban, they scavenge, they salvage parts from boats, from other cars, from Lada cars, and fit them back into these, just to get these cars running. It's amazing what they can do. Yeah, sorry. So this itself has been, there's a TV series called Cuba Chrome in the Discovery Channel. Okay, it's quite common. So we went to one of these shops where they showed how they were salvaging various parts from even the one fellow said that he had taken the boat's inline engine and replaced his car engine with the boat's engine. So it's just amazing what things they can do to get these cars running. Next. So we went to this there was the Colon Cemetery, which is one of the world's greatest cemeteries. It is second in Latin America after the Recoleta in Buenos Aires. If you've been there, where Eva Perón made that famous. So next. So next we went to this rum and cigar distribution factory. The lady actually ran a small hotel, but to subsist her income, she started this rum and cigar distribution. Tobacco was a big cultural thing in Cuba. They used the filler tobacco as a special flavor that's grown, and they have the cigar, the leaf to wrap it around, and then a finished tobacco to wrap it around. And Cuban cigars are banned. You're not allowed to import it into the US, nor is rum allowed to be imported into the US. But cigar rolling demonstration, rum drinking, with the rum they make mojitos and all other kinds of soft drinks. Anyway, next. Not soft drinks, sorry. The sports is a big very important part in the lives of the Cubans. So this is, we interviewed with the baseball players, Rolando Macias. And of course, the Cubans are known for their boxing. There's, I think you've heard of Theophilo Stevenson, some of those boxers. So, and then we stayed, visited the Hotel National de Cuba that became opened in 1930, and this was the venue for the rich and famous. In 1946, December, it hosted a mob summit run by Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. If you've seen Godfather 2, yeah, that whole scene was enacted in that movie. So the next one shows the various people who have visited.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, I know. It'll come back to you. So I'll speak a little louder when this happens. So all the famous, you can see Gary Cooper, Buster Keaton in the 30s, Fred Astaire, Rita Hayworth, all the people in the 40s, and then 50s, Marciano, Nat King Cole, all the great people who would like to be seen in Cuba and visit Cuba. Next. So this is called the boardwalk or the Malecon. Malecon you'll find in a lot of cities in South America. But you can see that this is not well maintained. The government obviously doesn't have enough money left over after providing health and education and other social food, subsidized fuel. They're very little. But now, because of tourism being important, they're trying to update these facilities. On the left bottom, you see the US consulate. So the US still has a consulate. It's a small one in Havana. And then some of the Spanish buildings have been converted into restaurants. And you can see that the lady singer is quite a famous singer, but she has to make do with singing at these dinner parties. So this is just. So we toured the old Havana, which is a heritage site. It's a typical Spanish city with squares, and you can see the colonial architecture, and of course these 1950s old American cars. A lot of places. Next. So this is the governor's house, Plaza de Armas. It's typical of most of the Spanish cities. And in the middle you have the beautiful garden with the statue of Carlos Cespedes, who led the first War of Independence in 1868. Next. Again, colonial architecture, but you see some touches of the Moorish balconies. So you have that, the Moorish influence as well. And then the middle of this particular plaza has the Plaza of the Lions, the Fountain of the Lions. If you've been to Alhambra in Granada in Spain, you would have, it's a replica of that. Next. We passed by a school. The school children were being taken to a museum, and by the color of their scarves or ties, you could tell what class they were in. So they are wearing red ties, and then you get blue ties and green ties, and they tell you which class they're in. And you can see that the students are paying attention to the teacher, even though we were walking right by there in the main road. Next. So education is compulsory, and subsidized by the government all the way through university education.
Excellent.
And education is compulsory. The literacy rate is very high in Cuba. So one of the places they maintain is this Hemingway house. Ernest Hemingway spent about 20 years in Cuba and wrote several of his famous 7 novels here in Havana. The Old Man and the Sea being the most famous one. He got the Nobel Prize in 1954. They maintained his house and the way it used to be at that time. So that's just a big tourist attraction. Next. one thing I found out about Ernest Hemingway in 54, I think it was, early 54, he and his wife had gone to see the Murchison Falls in Uganda, in Africa. They'd chartered a plane, and the plane crashed. So the pilot and the wife, and they all suffered back injuries, neck injuries, head injuries. They finally were able to survive in the brush, and they were rescued by someone who came over, who were looking for them, on them, took them to the city, put them on another small plane, and that plane crashed.
Oh,
So two successive. So it's amazing that he survived. And I thought that was an interesting thing about understanding. This is another typical type of education. Education, I said, was free, but for after-school projects, etc., these schools, remedial schools, are funded by UNESCO. So this is the type of enterprise that they can allow to run. Next. We went to an organic farm because of lack of refrigeration, lack of fertilizers. They don't make fertilizers, that thing has to be imported. So farming, it has to be near a city so that they can truck it to the closest market. So the organic farming is being promoted by the Cuban government. And so here's, we met an organic farmer. And so 90% of Havana's fresh produce comes from these organic farms. Next. So this is a typical Cuban food. It's called the ropa vieja. You'll find it in other places too, in Mexico too. It's called, basically it's shredded. Ropa vieja means shredded old cloth. Basically it's flank steak with tomato sauce. And then they also have black beans, white rice, plantains, yucca, and Crystal beer is the most popular beer. Havana Club is a favorite rum, and it's the base for cocktails. The Cuba Libre is a very popular cocktail. Mojitos, daiquiris are made from rum. Next. So here we then went on our way to the Bay of Pigs. And the Bay of Playa Giron. Giron is pig in Spanish. So we met a naturalist. We got a talk with a naturalist on a biosphere reserve nearby. And then we went to this museum where they celebrate the landing in the Bay of Pigs and how the invasion was thwarted by the Cuban army. Next. We arrived in Trinidad. There was an open-air concert going on. Next. We have a video of that.
This one?
Yeah. So this is Trinidad with its colonial heritage architecture. It's one of the best preserved Spanish colonial cities in South America. This was when the sugar industry was at its height. These sugar barons made these beautiful palatial houses here. And the next slide. Get more of the Spanish colonial architecture. Next. And you have these horse-driven mules and horse-driven, mule-driven carts, very typical of, if you've been to some of these Spanish heritage cities in Central America, you'll see the same. Yeah, next. So we visited an artist, Judith Vidal Fife, who did embroidery and painting in the same. So anyway, she talked about her attempts at entrepreneurship. So again, it's giving you an idea of the different types of entrepreneurships that the people of Cuba are using their skills, their culture, their artistic talents to survive and make a living. Here again, wherever we ate food, went for meals, there was always a band playing and a small group of people entertaining us. This is a ceramics factory. The Santander ceramics factory has been there in the family for about 100 years. So that's another entrepreneur we met with. Another. Next. Here's a typical, this is near Cienfuego, which was the center of the sugar trade. And you can see some of the rich sugar barons, the type of houses that they built. And then here's a nicely planned boulevard with shops and colonial architecture. Next. So this is the Plaza Mayor, or the major plaza in all the Spanish cities. And there's a Jose Marti, I was talking about the poet, and the leader of the Second Revolution, his statue in the middle. You can see the Opera House and the governor's palace. Next. Here we were entertained by a chamber music orchestra, and you can see it's amazing that each of the instruments must have cost them a year's wage, to be able to afford it. But this is another way of, you can, but it's chamber music. So these are the various types of entrepreneurs that we met with. As you can see, every day there were two or three meetings with different kinds of entrepreneurs. So these are some of the sites. There are long lines for ration shops, people lining up for food or fuel or whatever, the type of transport. You've got bicycle-driven or horse-driven transport. Next. And here back in Havana, we went and saw a Cuban cabaret show. We paid about maybe $20 for front row seats with a mojito thrown in as well. In the heyday, 40s and 50s, was famous for its cabaret and they had connection that Las Vegas Stardust particularly was owned by the mafia, and that was recently blown up. Okay, here's downtown and modern. This is modern Havana. You can see some of the boulevards are designed like European boulevards with colonial buildings, huge garden and square in front of all the government buildings. You can see the Capitol building is actually 1 meter taller, 1 meter wider than the capital city in Washington. I think it was done with that in mind. It's a copy of the Capitol building in Washington. Next. So here, this is called Revolution Square. Some of the government buildings are flanked by, this is done in steel wire and rods. You have Sheikh Guevara and Camilo Cienfuegos, two right-hand leaders of the Cuban Revolution who fought with Fidel Castro. Next. So here's where we visited another group of entrepreneurs. They are beyond roots. They're dedicated to Afro-Cuban culture. And this is the Santeria religion, which is a syncretism, the Yoruba religion of West Africa, the Catholic Christianity, and Spiritism. So they have God, and then they have spirits for different kinds of activities, and they pray to these spirits. So this is, they say that about 50 to 60% of the Cubans have this practice Santeria religion at home. Next. It's somewhat like the voodoo in Haiti, and it's the same type of Pan-African Cuban culture. Of paintings, the artists have many galleries, beautiful paintings. You can pick them up for a very nominal price. Next. Here's circus acts. Circus acts. This is after school, of course, but they are pursuing a career in circus. Circus is dead in the US, but in Eastern Europe and Russia and other places, a lot of places in Asia, these trapeze artists or circus performers can make a living by going overseas. Next. Then there are lots of these music bands, Cuban culture with its African heritage, with its beats, and they mix it with European melody and harmony. So we saw a lot of these groups entertainers as entrepreneurs again. Next. We can play a little bit of the dance style is salsa. So then our last day, day 7, was the highlight. We were taken through Havana, cruising in these classic American cars. There are 50,000 of these cars in Cuba, and it's a family heirloom. And highly priced cab ride in these would cost you much over twice a normal taxi fare, and but it sustains the family. Next. So here we are going on a ride. I took this from the back of my car. Next. So basically, this is what we traveled with Globus, and it was for 7 days. The cost was $3,500. I don't know what it is now, without airfare. And Plus there was a single supplement, and then we took travel insurance. So the overall cost for me as a single was about $4,100 for the 7 days, with everything included. That's it. Yeah, that's right. So that ends the presentation.
¡Eso! ¡Sigue sonando el bongo! ¡Dale!